Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari इसको बुलंद की जाए, शब्दपाठ की जाए, शिशिकोटनताय माय प्रशस्ति की जाए, गौर प्रेमानंदी हरि बोल. Reaching from our family business. Then Srila Prabhupada gave the job of finding the Gita a publisher to Brahmananda. Did we read this yesterday? Brahman told me in an interview that he guessed only a Krishna conscious publisher would be interested. You did that one? ISKCON Press. Okay. ISKCON Press. By 1967, Srila Prabhupada had heard of the respected Japanese publishing company Dai Nippon, and in 1968 he published a TLC with them, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. The Macmillan abridged edition of Bhagavad Gita as it is was finally available in 1969. The devotees not only read these two books, but also sold them to bookstores wherever they could. Still, sales were slow. Sales of the Bhagavad Gita were also slow. Sales of the BTG were also slow. So to cover BTG's monthly printing costs, Srila Prabhupada approved Rai Raman's suggestion that they sell ad space in the magazine. However, after seeing the hippie ads Rai Ram was running, Srila Prabhupada withdrew his approval. He had already considered printing BTG with Dai Nippon to increase the professional standard of the magazine, but this meant that ISKCON would have to purchase a minimum of 20,000 BTGs per month. ISKCON was at that time selling only 500 copies a month. On February 15, 1969, Srila Prabhupada wrote Rai Ram a letter revealing his plan for a wider distribution of BTG. I can induce Los Angeles to pay $750, and we can deliver them 5,000 copies of Back to the Godhead. Similarly, if San Francisco contributes $750, we can deliver them 5,000 copies. So far as Los Angeles and San Francisco are concerned, I can ask the boys to work and pay $750 positively every month. Similarly, if New York has agreed to work and pay $750, then the whole question is solved, and we can print 20,000 copies immediately from Dai Nippon. I do not know if it is practical, but to my mind, if New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles agree to pay $750 each month, there is no problem. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, Text 4. Ekadasura Ratputram Ankam Aropya Pandava Prapracha Kathayatam Vatsa Manyate Sadhu Yad Bhavan Ekadasura Ratputram Ankam Aropya Pandava Prapracha Kathayatam Vatsa Manyate Sadhu Yad Bhavan Ekadasura Ratputram Ankamaropya Pandava Papracha Kathayatam Vatsa Manyate Sadhu Yad Bhavan Ekadasura Ratputram Ankamaropya Pandava Papracha Kathayatam Vatsa Manyate Sadhu Yad Bhavan Ekadasura Ratputram Ankamaropya Pandava Papracha Kathayatam Vatsa Manyate Sadhu Yad Bhavan Ekadasura Ratputram Ankamaropya Pandava Atatra katitam vatsa manite sariyat of ladies. Ekatasurarat putram Ankamaropya pandava Pracha katitam vatsa manite sariyat. Ekata, once upon a time, Asurarat, the emperor of the Asuras, Putram, his son, Ankam, on the lap, Aropya, placing, Pandava, O Maharaj Yudhisthira, Papracha, inquired, Gatyatam, let it be told, Vatsa, my dear son, Manyate, considers, Sadhu, the best, that which, Bhavan, your good self. Translation. My dear King Yudhisthira, once upon a time the king of the demons, Hiranyakashipu, took his son Prahlad on his lap and very affectionately inquired, my dear son, please let me know what you think is the best of all the subjects you've studied from your teachers. Please repeat. My dear King Yudhisthira, once upon a time the king of the demons, Hiranyakashipu, took his son Prahlad on his lap and very affectionately inquired, my dear son, please let me know what you think is the best of all the subjects you have studied from your teachers. Prabhupada ki jai. Hiranyakashipu did not ask his young son anything that would be very difficult for him to answer. Instead, he gave the boy a chance to speak plainly about whatever he thought might be best. Prahlad Maharaj, of course, being a pure perfect devotee, knew everything and could say what the best part of life is. In the Vedas it is said, Yasmin Vigyata Sarvam Evam Vigyatam Bhavati. If one properly understands God, he can understand any subject matter very nicely. Sometimes we have to challenge big scientists and philosophers. By the grace of Krishna, we emerge successful. It is impossible, practically speaking, for ordinary men to challenge scientists, philosophers, concerning genuine knowledge. But a devotee can challenge them because the best of everything is known to a devotee by the grace of Krishna. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 10:11, Tesham ivanukam partam aham agyana jam tamaha nashyami atma bhavastu jnana dipena bhashvataha. Krishna, who is situated in the core of everyone's heart as the super soul, dissipates all the ignorance from the heart of a devotee. As a special favor, he enlightens the devotee with all knowledge by putting before him the torch of light. Prahlad Maharaj therefore knew the best of knowledge, and when his father inquired from him, Prahlad gave him that knowledge. Prahlad Maharaj was able to solve the most difficult parts of problems because of his vast Krishna consciousness. Therefore, he replied as follows. Om Agyatamirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunidanyena Tasmai Shivire Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, King Yudhisthira, once upon a time, the king of the demons Hiranyakashipu took his son Prahlad on his lap and very affectionately inquired, my dear son, please let me know what you think is the best of all the subjects you've studied from your teachers. And I was thinking it's very unusual for a demon to be so affectionate to his son, especially Hiranyakashipu. But we can see that the reason he's asking Prahlad Maharaj in such a way is because every father or mother, every parent wants to, boost their pride by knowing what their child is learning. So, for a devotee parent, if the child is learning something, it'd be really nice to hear them chant some shlokas, or boost the parents' pride to see that their child is learning so many amazing things. So here, Hiranyakashipu, he's thinking about Prahlad Maharaj. He's probably learned something amazing by his teacher. So let me hear what he has got to say. So he's asking, he's thinking that Prahlad's probably learned some politics and something, that his teachers have taught him something, how to in the world, how to heal nature. He's asking all the questions. This is something like, what have you learned? And so Hiranyakashipu was thinking that Prahlad Maharaj was going to tell him that he's learned some treachery, some deception, something demoniac. But here, this is Prahlad Maharaj. It's like another world. So he doesn't, he kind of surprises his father that he's not learned anything from his teacher, but he gives him the highest knowledge of Krishna. So how to get free from this material world, how to become detached from it. He starts talking about Varnashram, and Prabhupada points out that any devotee who honestly endeavors to repeat the words of Krishna or the spiritual master, he can be empowered to defeat the greatest atheistic materialists. And this is only possible by the grace of Krishna. So here, Prahlad Maharaj is gaining this knowledge from within. Narada Muni, when Prahlad Maharaj was in the womb of his mother, Narada Muni gave him, gave transcendental knowledge. So that was absorbed by Prahlad Maharaj. But he wasn't in contact with any devotees after his birth. So how did he get all this knowledge? But Krishna within his heart is giving him that knowledge. So he, Prabhupada, says that the torch of light, Lord Krishna enlightens the devotee with all knowledge, putting before him the torch of light. So Krishna is within the heart, so he can give us transcendental knowledge from the heart within, and he also appears as a spiritual master, so he can give transcendental knowledge from without, from externally. So we say this verse, Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Anvatanya Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So this is, we're praying that we're offering our obeisances to our spiritual master, who is enlightened, who is forcing open our eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. So the spiritual master, he's enlightening us with the torchlight of knowledge through the Shastras, through his instructions. And Krishna from within, internally, he's also dissipating our ignorance by transcendental knowledge. So in both ways, we're helped by Krishna, and internally as the super soul, and externally as the spiritual master. So it's interesting here. This Prabhupada uses this verse, Teshamavanu Parta Mahamagyana Jamatamaha Nashyami Atma Bhavastu Gyana Dipena Bhagavata. So this is the Bhagavad Gita 10:11, and it's interesting because the whole Krishna summarizes the whole Bhagavad Gita in 4 verses. There's a seed verses called the Chatrasloki, and this is one of them. So there's 10:8, 10:9, 10:11, and 10:8, 10:9, 10, and 10:11. These 4 verses summarize the whole Bhagavad Gita. Can anyone remember any of the seed verses? Can you see the translation? Okay, so that's 10, 10, 10, and so 10.
Swasya Prabhu. Swasya Prabhu. Adasam Pravatate. Edima Vajantiam Bodha Baba Samanvita. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts.
10:8 and 10:9.
I know 10:11. तेषामे वानुकं पार्थ अहम ज्ञानजं नाशयामि आत्मभावस्तो ज्ञानदीपेन भास्वता.
Have it 10:9.
मच्चित गान बोधयन्त परस्परं कथयन्तश्च मां नित्यं तुष्यन्ति च रमन्ति च.
Translation.
I don't remember the literal English translation, but devotees, they congregate and come together and chant my glories, sing my glories, and by chanting and singing my glories and all, they enthuse each other and they find lots of relish within each other in Krishna.
Thank you. So these 4 verses basically summarize the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, because the first one, 10:9, 10:8, Krishna is saying, Ham Sarvasya Prabhu. So he's saying that I'm the source of all spiritual worlds, material and spiritual worlds. So Krishna's, he's stating himself that he's the source of everything. He's giving knowledge of himself. And the next one is Machitagata Prana 10:9. So Krishna is here describing the symptoms of a pure devotee. What is the bhakti of a topmost devotee? So Krishna is saying that the minds of those who are, they're all constantly, the pure devotees' minds are absorbed in him. Their lives are fully devoted to service, and they're always enlightening one another and conversing about him. In this way, they're experiencing lots of bliss and satisfaction. So first of all, Krishna is describing himself, then he's describing the symptoms of pure devotees. And in the last 2 verses, 10:10, 10:11, he's actually describing how he reciprocates with his pure devotees. So 10:10, Krishna is saying that to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding they can come to me. So Krishna gives the intelligence to those who are constantly devoted to him. And then 10:11, this verse here, Krishna is saying that he mercifully destroys their ignorance. He shows some special mercy by dwelling in their hearts. He destroys the darkness of ignorance with the shining lamp of knowledge. And it's interesting, the purport to this verse, Tishaman Kampatam, Prabhupada gives very nice purport. Just want to read it, part of it. So he says, the Lord tells Arjuna that basically there's no possibility of understanding that supreme truth, absolute truth, the supreme personality of God is simply by speculating. For the supreme truth is so great that it is not possible to understand him or to achieve him simply by making a mental effort. Man can go on speculating for several millions of years, and if he is not devoted, if he is not a lover of the supreme truth, he will never understand Krishna or the supreme truth. Only by devotional service is the supreme truth Krishna pleased, and by his inconceivable energy, he can reveal himself to the heart of the pure devotee. The pure devotee always has Krishna within his heart, and with the presence of Krishna, who is just like the sun, the darkness of ignorance is at once dissipated. This is the special mercy rendered to the pure devotee by Krishna. So it's so nice that, mental speculators or philosophers can go and speculate for millions of years, but they'll never be able to understand with their mental effort, they'll never be able to understand Krishna. It's only those who are devoted to Krishna, because Krishna is pleased by that devotion. He's pleased by that devotional service rendered by his pure devotee. And by that, by pleasing Krishna, then Krishna reveals himself to the heart of the pure devotee. So as we can see here, Prahlad Maharaj, he's not got Shastra in front of him. He's living in a demoniac kingdom. There's no Shastra explaining Krishna. There's no devotees. He's surrounded by demoniac personalities. So Krishna, by his devotional service, Krishna is pleased with Prahlad Maharaj, and that's how he's actually dissipating all his ignorance, all that in the heart, he's actually revealing himself within the heart of Prahlad Maharaj. So this is actually amazing because, you know, Prahlad Maharaj is such a great devotee that Krishna is just revealing everything to him within the heart. And that's a very elevated stage of Krishna consciousness. We can't imitate that, thinking that, you know, we're so advanced. We need association of devotees. We need the scriptures. We need Guru to actually enlighten us, to help us on the path of pure devotional service. But here we can see how great Prahlad Maharaj is. And this is actually how we get transcendental knowledge. How do we get transcendental knowledge? How does Krishna dissipate the ignorance? Well, as you can see from within, but he does that with very special devotees like Prahlad Maharaj. But externally, he actually reveals this knowledge to us through the scriptures, through the Bhagavad Gita, through the Bhagavatam, and through spiritual teachers, through Guru, Shastra, Sadhu. These are our means of gaining this knowledge. So whatever Krishna is, like Prabhupada says, whatever Krishna is, Krishna is like the sun, and the darkness of ignorance is once dissipated. So wherever there is Krishna, wherever there is knowledge of Krishna, then there's no ignorance. If those who are following this knowledge, they will not be in ignorance. And Krishna destroys that ignorance by his instructions. So we can see here in the Bhagavad Gita that the book distribution, as we're in a marathon, distribution of Bhagavad Gitas, this is actually destroying ignorance of people. Because how do we understand who God is? The Krishna here is actually in the Bhagavad Gita, he's God speaking about himself. He's himself speaking about himself. So you can't get any more direct knowledge than that. You know, it's like, it's so unique. You know, we hear about so many things. God may have said this or may have said that, but here Krishna himself, God himself is speaking that I am the source of everything. He's speaking about himself, so we can't get any more direct evidence than this. So actually to digest this, we actually have to be so hungry for spiritual knowledge, because it's just like, if we're not hungry, we can't really digest food, you know. We can eat it, but we're not going to digest it because we're not really hungry, and our fire of digestion isn't really good, you know. But if somebody is really hungry, you can give them anything to eat and they'll eat it, they'll digest it, you know. Even if it's very difficult to digest, they'll be able to digest it. So, you know, Krishna's saying, I'm the source of everything. I'm the source of all spiritual materials. Everything emanates from me. To digest that, you have to be really hungry for spiritual knowledge. You have to be really hungry for, you know, God consciousness. And when you hear that, then it's like you can digest it. You can easily accept it. Like, I got the Bhagavad Gita when I was 12 years old. I didn't understand anything about the world, what it's about. And as soon as I started reading the Bhagavad Gita, it was like, that's it. You know, it was like Krishna said he's the source of everything. I could accept it. I wasn't brought up as a Hindu family. I was brought up in a Sikh family where they don't even accept that God has a form. But I could never accept that. And as soon as I got the Bhagavad Gita, it was like, it was an answer to all my questions. It was like, I was hungry for this because I was wondering, what is the purpose of life? What am I doing in this world? What happens after death, you know? And I wanted to see what God looked like, because there's no concept of this in Sikhism that God has a form, and I could never accept how God cannot have a form, you know. And so it was like, as soon as I read these words by Krishna, I was like, Krishna, he is the source of everything. Yes, I could accept it. But if I wasn't so hungry for spiritual knowledge, I would have just read that and thought, oh, it doesn't really make a lot of difference to me, you know, I'll carry on with my life. But as soon as I read that, then it made a big difference to my life, and my life changed from then on. So these books are like that. They basically we're giving them to so many different types of people, but only those who are really hungry for this knowledge will digest it and be able to want to do something about it, you know. So, but still it has a purifying effect, because the Bhagavad Gita is in their house. Even if they don't read it, I've read stories where people got these books, Bhagavad Gita, on their bookshelf for years. They'd never even read it, but they still became a devotee. So it was just amazing that Krishna has that power. Just with the presence of the Bhagavad Gita in their house, they became a devotee. So we can't underestimate the power of these books. It's really, really a tremendous benefit people are getting by these books. So, and whenever they're actually hungry, they will digest whatever's in the book. They have to come to that point. But Prabhupada is really clearly explaining, like Prabhupada is saying in the purport here, that, you know, he's challenging all these scientists and philosophers who are very materialistic and atheistic, and they have a lot of, you know, word jugglery to describe how the universe began and all the rest of it. But Prabhupada, with simple logic, you know, life comes from life. That book, Life Comes from Life, is so simple logic that he could defeat them. You know, Prabhupada can defeat all these scientists and philosophers by so many simple logical statements. You know, life comes from life. You know, it's a simple thing. How can you create life from nothing? How can you create life from dead matter? It's just not possible. So, just by simple logic, and Prabhupada is saying that this Krishna is, by Krishna's grace, then we can defeat these scientists and materialists and help them to understand real knowledge. And that's why Prabhupada wanted this Bhaktivedanta Institute of Science to help challenge the scientists, to help people understand that the scientists are actually not the authority. People have so much faith in the scientists, but they're not the real authority. You know, they are speculating themselves. They do not know. So it's like blind following the blind. You know, if we follow what they're saying, we'll end up falling in a ditch like them. So it's very important that we understand what is the real knowledge, and Krishna is giving that in the Bhagavad Gita. Any questions or comments? I don't know what time we're supposed to finish. Yes, please.
Thank you. It's very nice. I liked it when you said, like, God is speaking directly about himself in Bhagavad Gita. What more specific can we get, sort of? It's not like maybe this and that, or heard from him or her. Also, this thing, what God looks like, is a very good and very good question. I wonder what God looks like, definitely. One question. So in the purport, Prabhupada mentions that Prahlad Maharaj being a perfect devotee. Very few instances, I think, in the purports, Prabhupada mentions like perfect devotee. And this whole world, like, is after perfection or something. Is there a difference between perfect devotee and pure devotee?
I think it's just another word for pure devotee. But I suppose there are different levels of pure devotees. So, but Prahlad Maharaj is like considered like a perfect devotee because he exemplified pure devotion. You know, like he not only had love for Krishna, but he was so compassionate to others. You know, he was wanting to give this to others. He's not just thinking about himself. You know, you have the Goshtya Nandis and the Bhajana Nandis. The Bhajana Nandis only interested in themselves, their own bhajan, you know. Whereas the Goshtya Nandis, they're not just interested in themselves, but they want to give it to others. They want others to benefit. And Prahlad Maharaj, as we see later on in the chapters, when Lord Nrsimhadev, you know, wants to give him the benediction, you know, then Prahlad Maharaj says, you know, I want to go and give this to those that are suffering, that to the people that are, you know, he doesn't just want to go into the forest and just meditate for himself. He wants to give this to others. He wants to have compassion upon others. So that's the more perfect devotee. is compassionate to the other souls and wants to give knowledge to them as well and save them. He doesn't want to save himself, but he wants to save others. So in that sense, he's more perfect than, I mean, all devotees are perfect, but the more perfect is the ones that want to give it to others and save others too. This is Lord Chaitanya's mood. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you. Just this difference between the Vajranandi and the Ghostanandi. I'm just a little bit confused because there's some exalted Vaishnava performing his bhajan. The mood of the Vaishnava is not, I'm doing this for myself, they're doing it for the pleasure of the Lord. But often we hear that the Bhajanandi is thinking of their own spiritual advancement, but it doesn't sort of seem so much like the mood of, the entirety of Krishna consciousness is about the pleasure of Krishna. So even if they're not involved in preaching, it's still not like a selfish thing as such.
They may not be preaching widely, they be just preaching to a few people that maybe come to them. They're not going out of their way to go and distribute knowledge. They're not going out like a sannyasi and going around the world preaching, but maybe they'll stay in one place and people may come to them for some guidance, some spiritual knowledge. Then that's more like a bhajanandi. Like if you think about it, it's not so much a bhajanandi, but they're so absorbed in the bhajan, that they don't want to be distracted from the bhajan by, maybe they'll get affected by the materialistic people around them, so they want to keep to themselves. Whereas the Goshanandis, they're not so much concerned. They see the importance of this knowledge, like going in book distribution. We're more concerned about them, that they get some knowledge. We're not so concerned, well, what if we get affected by the material energy, So, but the Bhajanandi they don't want to really be surrounded by materialistic people. They don't want to really be affected by their materialistic ways. It's more like that. Do you get what I mean?
I think it was back to Siddhanta Maharaj said the best preacher is the Bhajanandi who preaches.
Because we can have our internal bhajan, but we also want to give it to others, want to help others. We're not just absorbed in ourselves. Yeah, that's right. Because we have to have some sort of internal development ourselves, and then we can preach on that level. If we don't have any ourselves, if we're not internally developed ourselves, then we're only going to give us limited amount to others. So, like Prabhupada, he was like, like that. He was absorbed in his bhajan, but he also wanted to give it to others.
That says a Kanishta can give somebody a little face, and Majjhima Adhikari can give somebody a taste, and the Uttama Adhikari can give somebody bhav. So the more you develop your internal bhajan, the more you'll be able to have an effect upon people when you are preaching.
Yeah, so we have to develop our own bhajan as well. It's not, we can only do what we have. So if we're not so developed and strong in our own faith and our own relationship with Krishna, then it's difficult to give it to others because we don't have it ourselves. If we only have £100 in the bank, we can't give somebody 1,000. We have to have something ourselves. We have to develop our own Krishna consciousness as well, and then we can give that to others. So it's important, and both things are important. There has to be a balance.
Two questions actually. So, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, Vansi Das Babaji, were they Ghostanandis or Bhajanandis?
They're considered Babajis. So, they're very, very absorbed. And like Gokusho Das Babaji Maharaj, he's a Paramahamsa. So on that level, they're on Uttama Adhika, they don't see that somebody, they don't discriminate because they see everybody's better than them. You see, they're in such a high level of devotional service that they consider that everyone is better than them. They're so fallen themselves, so they can't preach. So you have to be in the Majjhima Adhikari to preach. You have to discriminate who is a devotee, who is not a devotee. You see, so these great souls, they're so absorbed in Krishna and feeling separation from Krishna, and they're seeing themselves so fallen that they don't see the need to preach because they consider everybody better than them. You see, so on that level, they can't preach. They're not able to. It's only Majjhima Adhikari that can actually properly preach, you see. So that's why Prabhupada is an Uttama Adhikari. He came down to the Majjhima platform to preach. Because on that level, you don't, you're a pure devotee. You don't see everybody's better than yourself. Is that okay?
I was chanting every day 192 rounds, but he still had time to preach. So he was doing both. He was setting the perfect example, but he was also preaching as well.
Yeah, Haridas Thakur's, and we can't imitate Haridas Thakur chanting 192 rounds, and absorbed in that kind of bhajan because our minds are so restless. We could try to do that, but we can't really imitate that kind of level of pure devotion. We have to, do the best we can in our own bhajan and give it to others because we are not able to sit in one place and chant for that many hours a day. Yes.
Thank you. Very satisfying response. How best to develop internal bhajan? First.
Well, depending what stage we're at in our Krishna consciousness, like it says, work hard now, samadhi later. This is what was the Prabhupada said. Work hard now, samadhi later. And first is deserve, then desire, sort of thing. So in the very beginning in our Krishna consciousness, we have to really work hard in so many different ways, preaching, so many activities to help us absorb our mind, thinking the welfare of the preaching, so many things. And then eventually when, we come to the level of nishta, where we become steady in our mind and our bhajan is like steady, then we can start thinking of like this internal development. It's more like Raganuga Bhakti, We have to purify our heart from the anarthas before we can start thinking of internal development. Because otherwise, if we read the Nectar Devotion, it's Rupa Goswami saying that if we don't, then we will prematurely try to enter into a realm which is not actually for us. So the internal development is really, we have to hear and chant and read, absorb ourselves in Krishna's pastimes, and preach that to others, to help others. And then when the heart's more and more purified, then it will naturally be that we will become inclined to remember Krishna when we're chanting, to remember his pastimes. It won't be like a forced thing. So we have to come to the point where it's a natural thing. It's not like a forced thing. But in the very beginning, we have to like hear and chant and read as much as we can to absorb the mind. Does that make sense? I mean, like when you see bhajan, like I'm thinking of, the Babajis that are absorbed in bhajan, they're like, they're on a different level, most of them, they've passed all this anartha nivritti stage and they come to ruchi, shakti bhava, So then we can think about internal bhajan because then we're purified in heart and we can become more spontaneous in our remembrance of Krishna. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know if that's answering the question.
No, thank you. It's definitely helpful answers.
Sri Ramakrishna talks about sadhana in Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani. He says the preaching is probably the most important part of our sadhana. To go out there and try to share Krishna consciousness with others, at least for Kanishtas, because the Kanishtas then forced onto the Majjhima platform. But a Kanishta could try to think, well, I'll just sneak over into the Uttama Adhikari platform and I'll leave out the Majjhima Adhikari section because it looks like too much hard work, too much book distribution. So then he becomes like a Sudha Uttama Adhikari. It's just his idea of what he thinks. Really what's happening is the Kanishta is restless. He doesn't want to commit. Majjhima, he sees the devotee, the non-devotee, the envious, and he also sees Krishna's arrangement. So he sees Krishna's put me here, in this particular temple, with this particular group of devotees, in this particular country, for a reason. And Prabhupada says in one of his letters, stop this restlessness. Progress in Krishna consciousness means to understand these things, you know. So that's the Majjhima, that he can go out and preach. And then that preaching will bring the Majjhima to the Uttama Adhikari platform. But then he'll just become a more powerful preacher, that's all. He won't give it up. Because, the taste is so relishable. Even Lord Chaitanya comes to experience what it's like to be the Majjhima Adhikari, to share Krishna consciousness. Experience that bliss.
Yeah, and we see Lord Chaitanya's associates, most of them are preachers. Lord Nityananda, Advaitacharya. They preached by example, and so like Haridas Thakur, he not only preached, but his behavior was perfect and he preached perfectly. So that's what we have to do. We have to also, our behavior has to be pure as well, and then we can preach purely as well. Yes.
Is it not once you're in contact with the super soul and it's communicating through your heart that you naturally do these things? So you're naturally inclined to live a more pure life, naturally inclined to preach and share knowledge?
That is like if we're following the super soul in the heart all the time, but generally we're not. We're thinking, listen to our mind, and there's Maya as well. So Maya is very strong. So that's why we're in the material world. You know, that's why we're not always absorbed in Krishna, because our minds are always restless and thinking of so many different things. So, like Prahlad Maharaj was in a very elevated stage, so he was absorbed in Krishna and he wasn't affected by the external world, whereas we're not so absorbed in Krishna. So Krishna is in our heart and he's always trying to help us, but we're not always listening to the super soul. We listen to our minds most of the time. And that's the problem. So that's why even if Krishna is in the heart and he's trying to prompt us, we may not be listening, we may not listen to him. We may want to do what our mind says. So that's why we need the association of devotees to help us. We need spiritual master to guide us. We need the Shastra to guide us. We need all these external means to help us. We need all the help we can get. So if we're advanced enough, we can see the Lord within our heart directing us, but we're not generally on that level where we can do that.
Yes, but I was thinking if one feels those intense feelings in their heart, usually are they not powerful enough to overcome the sort of ignorance in the mind? Do they not shine through and steer a person?
They can do.
Some people have come that are fully connected with the super soul, and we're aspiring to become. And sometimes we may have glimpses, epiphanies, inspirations, but then we go to the spiritual master and we confirm. Guru Maharaj says, "Okay, to Parasaryan, because I think I'm a gopi." The spiritual master will say, "Well, maybe not just Jaya," or whatever he will say, you know. So that's why we need the guru. And and another problem with, if you don't have a guru, is you can do a thing called cherry picking, which is where you listen to many different spiritual authorities and you just pick the things that you really like. Oh, I like that bit where he talks about it's okay to drink green tea. I'll take that. Yeah. I like the bit where he's talking about, you should do 24 hours of down sanctum. So then you just take a little bit from him and a little bit. So then you need one spiritual master, and you say, okay, is this okay? Is that okay? And then he'll tell you, because he's in touch with the super soul, and super soul saying, no, green tea is he's just going to get intoxicated if he does that, or whatever it is, and then that will override all these other cherry picking going on, just picking a few nice instructions that I like from him, a few ones from him, and I've got my own little variety of Krishna consciousness, my own special brand.
Yeah, so we don't really know. Sometimes our mind can come up with all sorts of things, and we think, well, this is the super soul telling me something, but it's not necessarily so. So that's why we need guidance, and that's why we need to check with our spiritual guides. Are we actually thinking the right and experiencing the right thing? Because it can be illusory. Maya is very strong, and so she can make you think that you're experiencing some ecstatic symptoms when you're not.
Prabhupada, you were saying, Prabhupada, when I chant, this amazing red light is coming in front of me. And Prabhupada said, don't worry, just keep chanting and it will go away.
So, we're in the world of Maya, so there's a lot of things that Maya is going to put forward. And, you may think this is something spiritual and it's not. That's what Prakriti Sahajas, that is what it's all about. They're thinking they're experiencing something, but they're not actually. It's illusory. It's not ecstatic symptoms. It's something else. Okay.
I think when you spend some time on book distribution, you can see firsthand what people's own delusions are. You sort of get reflection, people just telling you what they believe the universe is, or who they are, or what God is, and you can see they're just making something up. But they're very convinced about it, and they're willing to stand on the street and tell you what they believe. And you can see how strong that illusion is taking a grip of them. And so similarly, we can also become humble and appreciate that we can also be swayed by illusion, and therefore we have to take shelter of authorities. And therefore it makes us grateful that we have Shastra. Bhagavad Gita cuts through the illusion.
Yeah. And Prabhupada said that the problem with his disciples is they're not so much afraid of Maya. They're not afraid of Maya. So we just kind of become influenced very easily by the wrong things, and we think it's something spiritual, but it's not.
But he read that we should be very natural in Krishna consciousness. So he stripped off naked and he walked in front of the deities and offered them a daffodil. And then the other devotees were saying, Prabhu, you can't do this. It was in front of everybody as well. So you can read something and then apply it according to how you think. But you need the Guru, Sadhu and Shastra to confirm everything.
Thank you. So we can interpret things that are just said in the Bhagavad Gita and think, and interpret in our own way. Yes, it's a very tricky world, and so we have to be very careful, and that's why it's important to take an association of devotees who have been around for many years, who can understand your pitfalls that you can go through and save you from going through them. Okay, should I stop now? Is that okay to stop now? Okay. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, ISKCON Govinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. Sadhu Sangha ki jai.